All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome. Okay, some people are joining already. So hello to our virtual audience joining us now. Warm welcome to my guests that are also, whose smiling faces are slowly visible. On behalf of the Kompetenzzentrums for Empowerment, for Prevention and Empowerment, I'm happy to welcome you. We're struggling a tiny little bit because we had a bit of a technical problem. Our opening session of this symposium was accidentally streamed here. So the few people who figured out what was happening were able to join to watch the opening session on our stream, but then other people may have wondered what's going on. So sorry about that. For every event, there's always a bit of a mishap. Hopefully, this is the first and the last one that we're going to have during this symposium. A quick introduction from me. My name is Mariana Evenstein. I am a Jewish American journalist. I've been living in Germany for more than 20 years. And I'm really happy and feel very privileged to be moderating this talk with my guests today as part of this, what is in fact an annual symposium by the Competence Center for Prevention and Empowerment, or as it's known in German, Kompetenzzentrums für Prävention und Empowerment. Our talk right now is going to be taking place mainly in English, but also partly in German. The idea is that everybody gets to speak in whatever language they feel most comfortable with. A few words for people who were not watching the opening session, and perhaps for those of you who are not familiar with the Competence Center for Prevention and Empowerment, it is a very highly respected educational research institute. It's based in Berlin, but it's active all across Germany. It focuses on the prevention of anti-Semitism and discrimination, and at the same time on the empowerment of communities. Sometimes it is mistaken with its partner organization, which is called OFEC. That is a separate organization that offers counseling for those who are affected by anti-Semitic violence, and they've been working closely with several of the people who were in Halle and who were affected by the terror attack that took place there. I'm just hoping that I can hear my guests. I guess everybody's microphone, okay, I can see everybody is muted. That's good. So we don't have any distracting background noises. So everyone, we do know that this year's symposium is, of course, focused on the repercussions of the Halle attack on the political and educational sphere. We're going to be getting into all sorts of complex issues over the next couple of days, but first it was important for us to hear from those people, at least some of the people who were directly affected by the terror in Halle, who experienced it firsthand. So thank you to our guests for joining. I'd like to say, though, they're taking part in this symposium not only because they're survivors of the attack in Halle. They're not only survivors, they're actually much more than that. Each of them are among 43 co-plaintiffs in the trial against the perpetrator. These are people who are also academics, they're teachers, they're activists, they're entrepreneurs, but above all, they are human beings who have a voice, and they have a determination to stand up against the forces of hate and structural racism and anti-Semitism that made the crimes in Halle and unfortunately in so many other places possible. So I hope all of my guests are complete. I'd like to introduce them personally now. We're still waiting for one, I see. So Yaffa Fogel, are you there? Can she say hi? Is she with us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So welcome to you. Yaffa is a recent graduate of Barnard College in New York City, my hometown. She's worked as a curatorial assistant for the Neuengamme concentration camp memorial in Hamburg, Germany. She's also been a teacher in Brooklyn in New York, and she's now Berliner, where she's working at an educational nonprofit. So hello to you. I can also see Anastasia Platuchina. Hello to you, Anastasia. You were born in Russia, like my parents, but you grew up in Germany in the city of Lübeck. You are a doctoral candidate in sociology at the Goethe University in the city of Frankfurt am Main. Anastasia also works as a Jewish activist and feminist and is the director of the activities of the Jewish Agency for Israel in Berlin. So I'm really glad to see you. I also saw Ezra Waxman, who is originally from Boston. Ezra, can you hear me? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So welcome to you, Ezra. You are from Boston, but you also have lived and studied in Israel before you came to Germany to start your postdoctoral studies in mathematics at the Technische Universität in Dresden, but you also live in Berlin just because it's such a great place, I'm sure.
Yep.
So welcome to you. And Ismet Tekin, hello. Sind Sie da? Ja, Grüße. So Ismet, he was an employee, but now together with his brother, he is the co-owner of the kebab shop Kiez Dörner in Halle. Ismet is originally from Turkey, but he's been living in Germany for more than 12 years. So Ismet, wir sprechen miteinander auf Deutsch, das geht alles. So I have one more guest who, I don't know if she's with us. Is Sabrina Slipchenko with us? Not yet? Okay, well, maybe Sabrina will still join us, I hope. We can see her? Not yet. Okay, well, maybe Sabrina will show up. So I would actually just like to begin by asking a general question to all of you, which I have a feeling a lot of people are wondering about, and that's simply, how are you? It's been 12 months since the horror of Halle, but a year is also a long period of time. How do you feel in your daily lives, and how impacted are you now by what happened in Halle 12 months ago? So I don't know who would like to speak first. Anyone? Anastasia, vielleicht Sie dürfen auf jeden Fall noch auf Deutsch antworten. Also inwiefern ist Ihr Alltag, wird Ihr Alltag geprägt durch was Sie in Halle erlebt haben?
Erstmal hallo von mir und vielen Dank für die Einladung. Und genau, Sie adressieren mich einfach, in welche Sprache ich reden soll. Und dann tue ich das. Es hat, also das Jahr nach Halle im vergangenen Jahr ist sehr durchwachsen und hat sehr viele Ebenen, emotionale und auch aktivistische. Und gerade jetzt fühle ich mich ziemlich aufgewühlt, weil ich morgen das erste Mal nach Magdeburg zum Prozess fahre, hauptsächlich weil mein Mann Valentin Luzet dort auch aussagen wird. Und es ist ein sehr aufregender Moment auf recht vielen Ebenen.
And for you, Yaffa, maybe, to what extent do you feel that your daily life is impacted still by what you experienced a year ago?
Totally. I think the experience of what happened last October was something that really changed both the past year and also I think the rest of my life. It was an incredibly painful thing to go through, and the ripples of it I still feel today, and I think moving forward it'll still be there even if the ripples get smaller and smaller as time goes on.
Und Ismet, für Sie, inwiefern wird Ihr Alltag beeinflusst durch das, was Sie erlebt haben?
Hallo erstmal, ihr alles zusammen. Das ist ein schrecklicher Tag, was wir als Betroffene erlebt haben. Die Narben bleiben mit uns mit, die gehen nicht weg. Wir können das nur leichter machen, aber das braucht Zeit natürlich. Es geht nicht von heute auf morgen. Dieser Tag hat uns vieles schwer gemacht, auch viele Sachen uns beweis gemacht und leichter gemacht für Zukunft, dass wir zusammen miteinander weiterkommen können.
And Ezra, for you, what are things like for you today? And how much are you still impacted?
So I would say the last year was definitely, I just had arrived in Berlin, I think 2 months before. So it very much defined a lot of my experience over the course of the year, in particularly in shaping my community. Like suddenly I was with this, I had a group of friends kind of immediately upon arriving. So there were some benefits, I would say, in terms of just kind of having people to be close with right upon arrival in a new city. But I would say, I post this last Yom Kippur, so post 1 year, I really am trying to keep it kind of behind me, or kind of just return to focus on other priorities I have in life. So over the summer, I guess it was difficult for me to focus on work because the trial was kind of taking a lot of emotional energy and time. But now I do feel like I'm kind of returning a bit to myself, which is, I think, where I need to focus now going forward.
I'd like to talk to you all about your participation in the trial. Actually, just first to ask Ismet, because here I am, I'm back. The technical problems don't seem to be ending. So I was somehow disconnected from the WebEx, bad WebEx, okay? Sorry about that. I was in the middle of asking Ismet about the fact that initially only his brother was invited to participate as a co-plaintiff. If you could explain why that was and why it was important for you to make sure that you could in fact participate as a co-plaintiff. Ich hoffe, Sie haben meine Frage verstanden und Sie können natürlich auf Deutsch antworten.
Ja, mein Bruder ist als betroffene Nebenkläger genommen. Mich wurden die abgelehnt von Generalbundesanwaltschaft, weil der Täter angeblich wollte mich nicht töten. Aber das hat mich genervt und gestört. Dieser Prozess ist für mich sehr wichtig, weil der Täter wollte nicht nur meinen Bruder oder mich, sondern alle Menschen, die dort waren, in Bewegung waren, er wollte alle umbringen und hat jeder geschossen. Manche von uns haben Glück gehabt, nicht getroffen, und manche haben Unglück gehabt, wie Jana Lang und Kevin Schwarz. Die könnten nicht mehr leben, sind gestorben. Und dann habe ich mich selber vielmals gefragt, was ist damit gewesen, wenn die Generalbundesanwaltschaft selber erlebt hätte, was konnte dann antworten oder sagen können. Und die haben über die Waffen geredet, die Reichweite, Verletzungen von Waffen. In dem Moment kann man nicht über die Waffen sprechen, wie weit es da die Waffen betroffen kann, wie ist die Waffe schärfer ist, wer hat gemacht, wie es gemacht ist, kommt gar nicht zur Frage. Es gibt Waffen, die bis 1000 Meter töten kann. Es gibt Waffen, bis 3000 Meter verletzen kann. Ich habe 18 Monate bei Militär. Ich kenne mich aus, aber ich hasse Waffen. Das ist eine andere Sache. Aber in dem Moment, wer kann rechnen, welche Waffe benutzt der Täter? Und nach mir dem Polizisten, der hat auch geschossen, die Scheiben von Polizeiautos kaputt gegangen und die Autos Schaden gekommen mit den Kugeln. Wenn wir auch getroffen hätten, vielleicht, man weiß nicht, wo man trifft, Kopf oder Herz, spielt keine Rolle, dass man innerhalb paar Sekunden später sterben kann. Man kann auch eine kleine Verletzung mit Steine haben auch dadurch sterben. Das ist eine andere unterschiedliche Sache. Ich hatte mir gewünscht, das nicht zu erleben und diese traumatisierte Sachen haben, das mich kaputt gemacht hätte, hätte ich noch besser um mich selber gekümmert, auch meine Brüder, auch meine Familie. Und wenn ich nicht Betroffene bin, das heißt, ich bin Nebenkläger. Also eine Betroffene, egal wer es ist, dadurch ist, er ist Nebenkläger. Dann hätte ich mir gewünscht, dass ich nicht wäre. Dann hätte ich viele Sachen anderes gemacht, dass die alle bis jetzt nicht im Kopf gehabt haben oder gedacht haben. Es war deswegen mir wichtig und die Prozess weiterfolgen und jeden Prozess gehe ich und nehme ich teil, weil ich will jede Meinung hören darüber, wer was redet, wer was aussagt. Und das ist eine sehr wichtiger Prozess für unser Leben, die als Ausländer in Deutschland leben. Es spielt keine Rolle, dass, welche Nationalität wir haben, welche Glauben wir haben. Wir sind Menschen, in Deutschland leben wir als Ausländer. Angeblich, dieses Wort mag ich auch nicht, aber nenne ich leider so. Wenn wir bunt sind, Demokratieland sind, dann deswegen dieser Prozess ist mir wichtig, was rauskommt, wer welche Aussagen macht, auch von Generalbundesanwaltschaften und die Anwältinnen. Von jede Wort ist mir wichtig, wer was darüber sagt und denkt.
Vielen Dank, Ismet. I see that Sabrina has joined us. Sabrina, I thought I saw Sabrina a moment ago. There she is. Welcome. We're really glad you could join us as well. Just a quick introduction. Sabrina Slipchenko is a writer and activist originally from Philadelphia in the US, but now she's also based in Berlin. And she's a research fellow at the Kreuzberg Kollel in Berlin, which is a community-led Jewish studies initiative. Hello, Sabrina. We were just talking about why it was important for each of you to participate as co-plaintiffs in the trial against the Halle perpetrator. We can basically expect this guy is going to be put behind bars. So you didn't have to be doing this necessarily. I mean, the outcome, I think we can all assume, will be that he'll be imprisoned. And I'm curious to hear from each of you about your motivation for going through this experience. So since you've joined us, would you like to be the next to share your thoughts about that?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Forgive the technical difficulties. It was unexpected and very Murphy's Law-esque. But I'm really glad to be here with you guys. Yeah, my motivations for joining the trial process were just that I didn't want things to happen without me. You know, it already felt like so much of it, from like the attack to the news coverage of the attack to the ambitions of the prosecutor, happened without me or without like care for the interests of the survivors, actually, not only me, but it seems like it was like a circus that just had its own momentum and then carried on completely without the survivors' input initially, and I would say even now to some extent. And so, yeah, I just wanted to have some agency over the process in the search for justice. Yeah, I didn't want to be this like passive victim figure who can be now used to like the ends of the German state, whatever they like, you know, I wanted to have my hands in the process for finding justice somehow.
Do others feel the same way? Ezra?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. My initial motivations were mainly curiosity. I just really wanted to understand the perpetrator because I had never met a Nazi before, for instance. I think I was just really curious about like, how does someone kind of arrive at the sort of lifestyle that he chose for himself, to sacrifice his own life to sacrificed the life of his mother. I mean, like and then of course to kill people. Just how could someone hate so much people that he's never met and that he knows nothing about? Like, these are just questions that were of interest to me. And I kind of found this as a nice, or I was given this opportunity to kind of explore those questions. And I think I saw myself, I thought of myself along the lines of someone like Hannah Arendt. You know, she went to the Eichmann trial, she wrote about it, she collected her thoughts about hatred. I think in order to combat hatred, you have to understand hatred. And so I think it was definitely like an emotional and intellectual curiosity of just trying to get at the heart of what this story is about. And yeah, I'm still in that process. I think I have learned some things about, I've come to some intermediate conclusions about those sorts of questions. But yeah, that's definitely like was my main source of, that was my main intention. I think secondary, there was other motivations. So first of all, right after the attack, I spoke a little bit just before about kind of the community that I built, but that was mostly amongst the people at the synagogue, and particularly the young people at the synagogue, who we had kind of arrived there together. And I did realize that that was just one piece of this larger community of survivors, which I just wanted to kind of reach out and kind of meet new people. So Ismet has become someone, an important person in my life, just to kind of reach out. Even we now even built a community, not just the people from Hala, but also the people from Hanau and other survivors of a much wider community. And that's just been, something that that the trial kind of helped perpetuate. And those are the main motivations. I think I also wanted to, along the lines of maybe what Sabrina said, just give, I feel comfortable in my skin, in my Jewish skin as a Jew in Germany. So let me speak a little bit about what my perspective can contribute to this story.
Ezra, I would like to come back to a few things that you were talking about, but I want to give Yaffa first a chance also just to say for herself what motivated you to be a co-plaintiff in this trial.
I think there are also a lot of reasons that went into why I wanted to be a co-plaintiff. The first was that, especially as the statement from the prosecutor unfolded, who was actually invited to be a co-plaintiff or not, there was even a question at the start of that process of whether those who were in the synagogue would be recognized as co-plaintiffs. And when that didn't extend to everyone who was involved at the dinner shop, it really struck me, and it made it important for me to be a part of it. And I think also, like Sabrina said and Ezra echoed, it provided me a lot of agency in this situation. And it also allowed me to deepen my understanding to the way that the judicial system has its limits, and also the places for us to raise our voices, and the elements that of this attack that we could lend our voices to hopefully deterring other attacks in the future. I think you're right in that the end of this trial is hopefully clear. Hopefully it's a jail sentence, but the effects of this trial much later on, and the attacks that we could hopefully prevent by changing the conversation, and by hopefully setting precedents in the judicial system and raising our voices in the legislature, that could really cause a lot of effects for others.
I have to admit that when I read about the fact that, for example, Ismet was originally not invited to be a co-plaintiff, and hearing from you as well that people inside the synagogue were also originally not intended to be co-plaintiffs, I find that really shocking. And I struggle to understand how anybody could justify that. And I'd want to hear if there were other things that you have heard during the proceedings at the trial that have been surprising or disappointing or just eye-opening in general, just so far what you have experienced at the proceedings, what stood out for you. So anyone is free to raise their hand if you want to answer first, because I'd like to hear from each of you. So hard, this like virtual. Yeah, Sabrina, go ahead.
I just have one thing that popped into mind immediately, which was that the judge, after we gave our witness reports, asked us if we were going to stay in Germany. And I just think that that's a weird thing to ask. Also, like, it's so irrelevant, and it just seems like, great, so are you going to leave now? Or like, how much do we have to care about you because you're going to go? But it's also, whatever, who knows what motivations were. Maybe it was purely curiosity, but the reason that it struck me as strange was because that's like what we get all the time when it's like, okay, now where are you from? Can you go back there? Are you going to stay here? And so, yeah, that was like something that in the moment I didn't realize, but afterwards, like really after like the days of giving the witness statements, I was like, wait a minute, that was weird.
And Ezra, you touched upon it just a moment ago, that you were curious to find out the motivations of such a person, how it can be so full of hate. So were you, what could you conclude then? What did you learn?
Okay, so I have to say that for some, I think this experience happened on Yom Kippur. And I experienced the day also through Yom Kippur. So that very much colored everything that I see. But in particular, what I learned from interacting with the perpetrator and just kind of reading his manifesto and kind of where he's coming from, his main, his battle is scapegoating. Like he had his own issues. He couldn't find himself a partner. He couldn't get himself a job. And despite the fact that he kind of had every opportunity in the world to do so, he was really enthusiastic about finding a scapegoat. And I think like traditionally, Jews have played a role as the scapegoat in European history to a large degree. And now there's kind of this two sides of the coin. There's like the Jewish scapegoat and there's the immigrant scapegoat. And I think that was just, I found it very telling because like on Yom Kippur, it's just, I found it very ironic because on Yom Kippur, like the reading that we do, for example, from the Bible is the story of the scapegoat, which is like part of the Yom Kippur ritual. And I just found it religiously ironic that this guy kind of carried out the attack to kind of find a solution to all his problems. And so, yeah, that's the main conclusion, or one of the things that I feel like I learned. And along those lines, I would say that I also found a lot of, I was very touched by the testimony of Kevin's father, because he spoke a bit about Kevin as a boy. And Kevin had kind of certain personal struggles in his life. But his dad was just speaking a little bit about how proud he was of kind of, despite additional complications that he had, he still kind of managed to find a friend group through his passion for football. He still managed to get a job, and his parents were really proud of his personal work. And I think also Yom Kippur for me is also about kind of reflecting inwards and working on yourself as a solution to problems. And I think the perpetrator just represents to me kind of the opposite of all of those values. And yeah, I saw a lot of religious symbolism, I would say, in that story.
Anastasia, what has stood out for you during the trial? Und wenn Sie möchten, können Sie natürlich auf Deutsch antworten. Was haben Sie erlebt im Prozess soweit?
Ja, also es ist auch für mich, ich hatte jetzt die ganze Zeit dran gedacht, wie kann ich das auf eine oder ein paar Sachen runterbrechen. Und gleichzeitig habe ich mich gefragt, ja, hat mich wirklich irgendwas gewundert oder war irgendwie besonders überraschend für mich in diesem Prozess? Ich glaube, grundsätzlich habe ich nicht die Erwartungshaltung gehabt, dass ja, wie soll ich sagen, dass da jetzt irgendwas Spektakuläres passiert. Was für mich tatsächlich besonders spektakulär war, die Reichweite und auch die Kraft der Aussagen von Nebenklägern und Nebenklägerinnen. Ich erlebe die deutsche Justiz als, und Yaffa hat vorhin von Präzedenzfällen gesprochen, als nicht unbedingt auf Präzedenzfällen aufbauende Struktur und auch eine sehr nüchterne und auf Empathie tatsächlich absichtlich fast verzichtende Struktur. Und dementsprechend war ich doch angetan davon, was die Stimme von Nebenklägerinnen und Betroffenen ausgelöst hat und ausgemacht hat und auch die Reichweite jenseits von diesem Gerichtssaal hatte und Wirksamkeit. Damit habe ich nicht so per se gerechnet. Also ich persönlich habe sozusagen meine Karte auf die mediale Beleuchtung von dem Prozess gesetzt und war doch überrascht davon, wie das auch im Gerichtssaal zur Ansprache von sehr schwierigen Themen kam und da auch es angesprochen wurde, was vielleicht jetzt nicht per se dazu führt, den Attentäter hinter Gittern zu bringen, wie Sie es formuliert haben, sondern auch gesamtgesellschaftliche Themen aufdeckt. Und das war mir persönlich wichtig, als ich mich als Nebenklägerin eingetragen habe. Und ich bin doch sehr angetan davon, dass es diese Wellen schlägt.
Ismet hat fanden Sie etwas überraschend oder irritierend, soweit was Sie beim Prozess erlebt oder gesehen haben?
Ja, es gibt manche Sachen, die ich genau wie ich erwartet habe, raus und auch natürlich viele Sachen sind, die noch offene Fragen da sind. Das muss unbedingt geklärt werden. Ist noch nicht geklärt ist. Dass ein starkes Land, Demokratieland ist, kann nicht einen Hintergrund, ein Täter rauszufinden, das glaube ich nicht und das glaubt keiner. Wir wissen alle, dass Deutschland ein starkes Land ist, dass wenn die wollen, die können alles rausfinden, was er vorgespielt hat und seit Jahren geplant hat. Das geht nicht von heute nach morgen. Dann bekommt man zwei Fragen, ob die wollen nicht oder warum nicht. Und das muss unbedingt geklärt werden für Zukunft. Es gibt wirklich eine große Gefahr, die viele nicht sehen, aber ich sehe, da ist sehr, sehr, sehr große Gefahr da ist, dass Tag zu Tag sich vorbereitet und zu uns alle kommen. Das spielt keine Rolle, wer wir sind, sondern dass Deutsche auch sind in Gefahr, wir auch, dass alle sind in Gefahr sind. Grund dessen, das muss unbedingt und sehr seriös hinter diese Geschichten, wer das tut, richtig aufsuchen, wer von wo kommt und das ist eine Kette, die zusammenhängt und das kann nicht sein, eine Kriminalpolizeibeamtin über die Lieder hat sehr schöne Bericht gemacht und warum, dann fragen wir uns, warum keiner kann uns so klar und deutlich sagen, was es hinter diese Täter ist. Es kann nicht eine Täter, der Mörder oder Feigling mit der Familie lebt, seit Jahren vorbereitet einen Plan, Waffen hin und her mit, arbeitet er nicht, Er hat in seinem Leben für sich alleine nichts gemacht, für Familie nichts gemacht, aber bereitet einen Terroranschlag für mehrere Menschen. Nur kann man dafür glücklich sein, dass er nicht Synagogen geschafft hat, reingehen. Sonst hätte noch mehr Katastrophe gewesen, noch mehr Menschen ums Leben gekommen. Und das hat er nicht geschafft. Aber keiner fragt nach, warum diese Junge so lange hat vorbereitet, für was und warum. Keiner hat das gesehen und verstaut, dass die Eltern sind auch verantwortlich, diese Junge zu erziehen. Wenn er eine falsche Schritte macht, dann muss den Eltern auch ihm anzeigen können oder eine Nachbarn oder Nachbarin oder Schwager. Der Schwager hat viel in der Lage zum Sagen zum Beispiel, aber er kann nicht sagen, irgendwie aus welchem Grund, das weiß man nicht, aber das ist nicht unsere Sache, sondern die von BKA und Kriminalamten, die das suchen und rausfinden können. Und das erwarten wir alle als Nebenkläger, Nebenklägerin, das zu hören, wer ist, das hinter diese Täter ist, finanzielle und unfinanzielle ihm geholfen hat und auch allgemeine solche Sachen rauszufinden, wer macht das. Und ich hoffe, Deutschland wird wach. Also wirklich, es ist sehr große Gefahr da. Und nichts ist niemandes zum Erleben.
Well, Ismet, that is precisely would have been my next question. You mentioned it just now. You know, we kept hearing in the media, especially, how this is a wake-up call for Germany about the dangers of right-wing extremism. And yet, I always would think to myself, well, how many more wake-up calls do we actually need? I mean, this is horrible, what happened in Halle, but it's also not the first time. So I'm just curious to hear from you if you feel that Halle was somehow different, that now people in Germany are more awake. Are they taking this problem more seriously? What's your sense just in the last 12 months?
Well, I would, if it's possible, I'd like to also go back to your previous question for a second.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think I want to start by saying that there are some parts of the way that the court has handled itself that I really appreciate. For example, the judge has broken away from precedent to allow the witnesses to provide their own statements and to speak for themselves and to give their stories. And I really want to thank the court for doing that. And I think that's also part of why I very thankfully was able to hear from Kevin's father about Kevin. And there are a number of things that have also been quite frustrating in the court. I totally agree with what Ismet's saying, and Nastia and Sabrina and Ezra. There were two moments that really sort of shone for me. The first was that during Kevin's father's statement, he mentioned that the police, even though they knew, or he intimated to the fact that even though the police were aware of the identity of Kevin, they didn't actually reach out to his father and to the family, but that he had to find out by watching the video. And that to me is horrifying, and I think a real indictment of the way that the police handled itself. And the second thing that really struck out to me was the statement that was brought by the BKA, the spokesperson that came to the courtroom to talk about the trial and to share the statement of what the government, what the BKA thinks actually happened in Halle, was that there was no relationship between Halle and other previous attacks in Germany or abroad. And the reasons that they brought this testimony was because the manifesto that was written by the perpetrator in Halle was very short, and it wasn't nearly as long as manifestos written in other places. And another reason that they said that there was no relationship was because it wasn't the BKA's job to look at the context of the beliefs of the perpetrator in Halle, and to look at the context of the beliefs of perpetrators elsewhere. And so I think to come to your second question, I don't see any difference between this attack and others, aside from the fact that there were a lot of Jews that were affected, and there's a special relationship in the German media with the Jewish minority. And I say that obviously with a lot of trepidation, but these attacks are being perpetrated elsewhere against other minorities in Germany and elsewhere, and it is not as talked about, and it doesn't create the wake-up call that happened just because this was an attack against a synagogue. And it's deeply upsetting that we had to be affected, that this had to happen because there was no wake-up call earlier, and that only because this also affected Jews. And so it cancels out anyone else who was affected by this attack, first. And second, it just continues this pedestal, or this image of the Jew in German society, that here there could be a wake-up call.
What's also very strange that I find, there's this talk of this wake-up call on the one hand, but then you heard numerous mainstream German politicians making declarations that Halle was an attack on all of us. It was an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on our way of life. So which one is it? Do you agree that this was an attack on all of us, or was it an attack on minorities in Germany? How do we look at what happened properly?
Ich an der Stelle das Mikro ergreifen. Also auch in Verbindung zu der Frage vorher. Also ich glaube, wir haben auch immer wieder von verschiedenen Wake-up-Calls gesprochen, und Halle war natürlich am lautesten. Gleichzeitig ist es gar nicht die Frage nach dem Wake-up-Call, sondern darauf gezielt, dass sich die Gesellschaft nicht irgendwie auf die andere Seite dreht und dann die Decke nochmal übers Ohr zieht und weiter fest einschläft. Es ist häufig Thema antisemitische, rassistische Überfälle, gewaltvolle Überfälle, teilweise vereinzelt, die nicht in Kontinuität gesetzt werden. Und ich glaube, das ist eben, was jetzt leider durch Halle und dann unmittelbar danach durch Hanau und die Ermordung von dem Politiker Lübcke, das ist schon das sind sehr große Einschnitte gewesen, die dazu geführt haben, dass es unmöglich wurde, das irgendwie zu entschleunigen und zu sagen, okay, das ist jetzt passiert, wir haben uns davon erholt, wir können jetzt das Thema wechseln. Und zum anderen glaube ich, dass gerade weil sich diese Gruppen zusammengeschlossen haben und diese Kontinuität aufgezeigt haben, ist es auch sowohl medial als auch politisch zu etwas Größerem geworden. Und in dieser Solidarität kann ich schon sagen, das betrifft uns als Gesellschaft insgesamt. Und da sind die Politiker und Politikerinnen liegen sie gar nicht so verkehrt. Gleichzeitig ist aber da meine Frage, was tun gerade diese Politikerinnen und Politiker, die das sagen, das betrifft uns alle, in Bezug auf die Menschen, die es dann tatsächlich gewaltvoll getroffen hat. Und da sehe ich eher schwierige Tendenzen. Da geht es doch manchmal zu sehr um die Politiker und Politikerinnen und zu wenig um uns, ganz explizit, und um Menschen wie uns, die es dann tagtäglich betrifft.
Does anyone want to add something? Yeah, we heard a lot of things from politicians in the wake of Halle. We were promised that there would be more police protection for Jewish buildings. Chancellor Merkel promised more educational initiatives to combat anti-Semitism and racism. We also heard all sorts of declarations of solidarity from politicians. I'd like to hear from you what you make of all of that. Do you feel solidarity from German politicians and perhaps just even the general public in Germany? Do you feel solidarity? Sabrina? Maybe? Or Ezra? Haven't heard from you in a few minutes.
I'm not sure how to answer that, so I'm just going to pass it over to Ezra.
Okay. I also don't know how to handle that, but I'll pretend to say something. First of all, I know that I wasn't there, but the Friday night after the attack in Halle, I know that whoever was there at the synagogue really felt a lot of gratitude to the people of Halle who showed up. I know Yassel, I think, spoke about that in his testimony. So there's definitely been like a lot of support from a lot of people. I don't think I have much to comment on the political assessment because I'm going to raise my hands and say I just arrived on the scene in Germany, so I don't have kind of a good feel for what the discourse is like. But when I went to the event on October 9th in Halle, most of the politicians were speaking about how this is not a one-time thing. They were, like, I think at the beginning amongst us, there was some concern that people would look at this as a one-off and not deal with the larger problem. I do think from the little that I saw from the politicians at that ceremony, there was talk about this in a wider context of the rise of right-wing extremism. So I do feel like to one degree or another, that is now in the consciousness of at least a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, like are aware, or some politicians are aware of the systemic nature of this issue and also really motivated to thing. I was on a panel with some politicians and I was quite moved actually that there are people in government currently that speak the way that I speak, about this issue. So there is hope.
Ismet, ich wollte Sie fragen, der Oberbürgermeister hat Ihnen ja versprochen, dass wenn Sie Probleme mit dem Geschäft haben, mit Kiezdöner, dass Sie mit Hilfe der Stadt rechnen können. Und der Ministerpräsident Rainer Hasselhoff hat auch Hilfe zugesagt. Haben Sie Unterstützung bekommen?
Leider nein. Da habe ich mehrmals darüber geredet, da habe ich eigentlich keine Lust mehr zum Reden. Ja, das ist allererste Mal, diese Laden überzunehmen, ist für mich sehr wichtig, für Solidarität, für unsere Zukunft in Deutschland, für allgemeine gemeinsame Solidarität zu zeigen. Dieser Anschlag hat meine Familie vergrößert. Durch die jüdische Gemeindeseite viele Bekannte, wir sind als Freunde, also finde ich, dass die sind auch Teil meines Lebens, meine Familie gehören und auch Solidarität. Unsere Kids-Gruppe ist auch Teil meiner Familie geworden, Opferbrateramt. Ich habe jetzt große Familie, das ist eine positive Seite. Und die Politiker und Politikerinnen sagen, dass der Anschlag von Halle ist uns alle betroffen, das war. Ziel war, Juden und Jüdinnen und Muslime, Musliminnen, Ausländerziel war, aber 2 Deutsche sind gestorben dadurch. Deswegen, das ist mehr wach geworden, die Politiker und Politikerinnen, weil die Mörder, die Feigling, die können jeder den Moment treffen kann, weil die können nicht entscheiden, wer ist was. Und das kann Grund dessen, diese Laden war für uns alle eine gute Zeichen für Deutschland und für Halle und für uns wichtig war. Am Anfang war viele Menschen haben uns Solidarität gezeigt und uns Mut und Kraft gegeben, dass wir weitermachen können. Und dadurch ich wusste, dass es schwer wird und kenne ich mich aus den Geschäften. Vor diesem Geschäft habe ich 3 Geschäfte gehabt. Gut oder schlecht, ist egal. Herr Haselhoff und Herr Wiegand, die haben Wort gegeben, uns weiter zu helfen, egal welche Art, welche Möglichkeit gibt. Dann habe ich gesagt, okay, wenn es wird schwer, ich schaffe so lange wie ich kann. Wenn es nicht mehr gibt, dann 2 wichtige Menschen, eine für den Ministerpräsidenten von Sachsen-Anhalt, eine Oberbürgermeister von Halle, die sind wichtige Personen, die haben Hilfe angeboten, die werden uns helfen, weiterzukommen. Mein Bruder wollte, dass wir nicht nehmen, aber ich habe als Respekt diese Solidarität, diese Menschen, diese gute Zeichen für Deutschland, diese Kraft setzen und genommen. Das war die größte Enttäuschung meines Lebens, dass ich als eine Betroffene mit meinem Bruder unter seit ein Jahr Tag und Nacht Schwierigkeiten bleiben und damit leben. Das hatte ich nicht erwartet und das jüdische JSUD hat eine starke Zeichnung gezeigt, also eine gute Lektion erteilt von dem Politiker. Besser kann man nichts machen. Also die stärkste Lektion, dass man die Politiker erteilen kann. Also die Summe geht mich gar nicht an, aber die Zahlen, die Personen, das ist mir Millionen wert. Was ist die Zusammenhaltung? Und das hat mich mehr Kraft gegeben als die komplette Politiker und Politikerin. Und das werden wir weiter tun für Deutschland, für uns alle. Also die sehen uns als Minderheit, aber wir sind Viertel davon, das, was wir leben. Wir sind über 20 Millionen Menschen, wir sind keine Minderheit, sondern wir sind ein Teil von Deutschland. Die sollen uns nicht als Minderheit rechnen, sondern wir sind mehr als Viertel. Also wir sind über 20 Millionen, wenn Deutschland 8 leben, das heißt, wir sind 5/4 wir sind und wir werden uns zusammen stärker weiter Zukunft für diese Gesellschaft tun, egal die Feiglinge werden am Ende verlieren. Wir werden gewinnen.
I found it also really moving to hear about the support that you got from the Jewish Students Union, but I imagine they're also not the only ones who have shown real support and solidarity. I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Where did you experience the most support, the most solidarity? Who or what has been a particular source of strength for you over these last 12 months?
I can go. So I'll start just with the Shabbat right after the attack itself. So again, from this kind of subset of the synagogue community, we all had dinner together, and that was just nice. That was my first community experience right after, and I realized, okay, there's a whole group of people now who I have kind of this special bond with. And then I remember Saturday night at the end of Shabbat, there was kind of an experience that touched the wider Berlin Jewish community, and it was just like a very beautiful event. I think that was the first time I shed a tear about the whole experience. It just was I was touched to see how touched the people who, at least at that point in the Jewish community in Berlin, how this affected them, and it was just really nice to kind of each layer of community that was growing in my life, seeing that step by step. And then there was a break, but then once the trial started again, also the bonds have kind of been growing across the different components of the group of survivors. So again, kind of reaching out to Ismet, I would say, on October 9th, when I went to Halle, it was just another beautiful experience I had was just eating, kind of having a little Shabbat dinner in the donor shop with a few people who happened to be there. We just made a little Shabbat Kiddush ceremony, and it was just cool to kind of reach out to a little bit more. And so, yeah. And I would say also, I didn't expect any help right after. I think there was a gap in my experience of realizing I kind of just dismissed this as some weird day I had, and then the next day I just went to work. It took me a while to kind of realize that there was a lot of layers to kind of get through in the experience. And I would say that I wasn't expecting it, but the help from OFEC and from MOPS and just financial support for psychological help and those sort of programs, which I don't know if they would be available to the same degree in other countries, but I really appreciated all of those kind of programs, and yeah, don't take those for granted.
Yaffa, for you, what's been the biggest source of support or solidarity, source of strength or healing for you?
I would first say the group of survivors, and the way that even with all the differences of opinion, there is a real sense of connection and love and respect, I think. That when we were penning letters of solidarity together, or when we were when I was at the trial, for example, that all of that solidarity was really healing, and connecting with people who are in other attacks as well, like Ezra was saying. I think this solidarity that's been shown among the minorities that are not so minor is one of the most powerful moments of healing. And I also really thank OFEC and the MOB and the other organizations that have been on the scene. And it's also been sometimes hard. It took a really long time to find therapy in Germany. And I know that for some other survivors, they still haven't been able to secure therapy here. And that whole process was really draining. And I feel really grateful that I wasn't alone, that other people weren't alone there, and that we could be there for each other while we were waiting to get help.
Anyone else?
Echo what the other folks said, and especially knowing that this didn't just happen to me. Like, it could have happened to anyone else who was in the synagogue, the street, or at a donor shop. And so, though it happened to me, it also happened to us. And then the connection with the group, and just knowing that you're not going through it alone, felt really good.
Ja, ich würde auch ganz gerne noch etwas hinzufügen, und zwar, ich glaube, auch das Wort Solidarität, da habe ich auch gerade kurz drüber nachgedacht, was es eigentlich für mich bedeutet in diesem Kontext. Also ich glaube, so die Quelle der Energie, die du, Marianne, vorhin angesprochen hast, war, glaube ich, eher so der zugängliche Begriff für mich. In diesem Kontext, mich hat tatsächlich stark getragen, mit anderen darüber zu sprechen, sowohl innerhalb Deutschlands, die es erlebt haben, so einen massiven Übergriff die es erlebt haben, aber gleichzeitig auch der internationale Austausch leider. Ich bin nach dem Attentat einen Monat später in die USA gegangen und war an einigen Orten, in denen es ebenfalls brutale Übergriffe, versuchte Massaker, teilweise gelungene Massaker stattgefunden haben, und darüber zu sprechen, was ist der nächste Schritt, wie erholen wir uns davon. Ich hatte das Gefühl, in den ersten Monaten war ich möchte jetzt für niemanden anderen sprechen, aber ich hatte auch die anderen, die das überlebt haben in Halle, auch teilweise so wahrgenommen, dass wir auf so einen Überlebenstrip waren. Wir waren voller Energie, die sich freigesetzt hat nach dem schrecklichen Erlebnis, was wir in uns getragen haben. Und wir haben dann skandiert, Am Israel Chai, und also uns kriegst du nicht klein. Und aber es ist auch dann wichtig zu denken, was ist der nächste Schritt, wenn das dann erstmal sich gesettelt hat, wie erholen wir uns davon persönlich? Und davon haben jetzt schon Ezra und Yaffa und Sabrina gesprochen. Und gleichzeitig, wie erholen wir uns davon als Community, für die es und tatsächlich, wie wir es schon hier häufig gesagt haben, es wahrscheinlich nicht der letzte Übergriff sein wird. Und gleichzeitig habe ich das erfahren in unserer Community, dass sehr viele so stark mitgefühlt haben, ausgerechnet die nicht in der Synagoge in Halle an dem Tag waren. Sie haben sich in diese Situation imaginiert, weil sie ja gar nicht so abwegig ist. Das hätte überall passieren können. Auch quasi die Idee vom Terror auf der einen Seite, auf der anderen Seite aber auch die Offensichtlichkeit der Verletzbarkeit der jüdischen Gemeinde als Anlaufstelle von vielen Juden und Jüdinnen. Ja, das war eine schwere Balance für mich. Ich glaube, dass das mit der Solidarität, es ist immer so eine Frage. Es ist auf der einen Seite wichtig zu sehen, dass Menschen diesen Ausmaß wahrnehmen und verstehen und hinter dir stehen. Gleichzeitig ist es aber nicht sofort gleichzusetzen mit der Energiequelle, weil es ja doch eine Wucht ist, zu sehen, wie viele Menschen es betrifft und dann sich auch die Frage zu stellen, ich als Überlebende, wie kann ich das tragen?
And I'd like to add just one anecdote that I went back to Halle a year after, and part of the thing that gives me power is seeing how much power the other co-plaintiffs have. And this is sort of, I'm echoing what Nastya says because it just reminded me, like, just to see that like people can still and have still continued to like live their lives and thrive after this is really, really inspiring. And I remember a year after Halle, so maybe a month ago or something, I went to some panel, and then after we went to Keatstoner, and I saw how Ismet was like struggling against like bureaucracy for like a year to get this plaque up, and then finally like this plaque comes up and there's all these people there and we're all eating together and like laughing and like dusting it off and like planting flowers, and I was like, wow, like these people are so strong, and I'm so honored that I get to learn from them in action how they can still live. Sorry if it's a little noisy on the street. It's very stream, but thank you.
It's very Berlin, Sabrina. We're with you. I want to hear more about some of these commemorations that have taken place for the 1-year anniversary. I think some of you touched on this a while ago. I'd love to hear a bit more about your experience, which ones you took part in. I forget who mentioned there was one event where there were also people coming from Hanau to take part. Could one of you tell me a bit more about that? So who was at the event where people from Hanau also joined?
Yeah, I'll go.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
Can hear from each of you. So Ezra, why don't you take it first? Because you were quick on the unmute button.
Right. Yeah, there was this, what was it called? Festival of Solidarity, which was a rebranding of the Jewish Festival of Sukkot, which we kind of put together in Berlin. And it really was, people came from, survivors from horrific attacks in the last 10, 15 years in Germany just were there. And there there was all sorts of events. There was a lot of speeches where kind of you heard voices of other people's experiences. My personal favorite part was just hanging out with everyone. And yeah, just kind of meeting really cool people. Again, this is kind of the excuse to just a lot of warmth between particularly the Jewish and Muslim community, I think, which is just really nice and kind of unique. So that was, the Festival of Resilience was was a pretty special experience, because that's also like, as time goes on, you can kind of build even more bridges. And I really do think that as a response to the perpetrator who attacked minorities in order so that they would feel unwelcome in Germany, I think our response has been to build a lot of strength amongst not exclusively minorities or anyone in Germany who just wants to be a part of the full spectrum of German society. I think what was cool about that festival for me too was everyone is speaking a little bit in their own cultural language, by which I mean anyone, but Jewish people, Muslim people, just have a lot of culture to offer to German society. And I think some of the events that I've most appreciated are ones in which people can kind of use their own cultural voice to enrich the multicultural society that we are building here, despite people who are in opposition to that.
Anybody like to add something?
Ja, vielleicht direkt daran anknüpfend. Also erstmal habe ich jetzt festgestellt, dass tatsächlich alle hier Anwesenden waren bei diesem Festival dabei, und Ezra hat schon einen Teil von diesem Festival angesprochen, und zwar den Part des sogenannten Festival of Resilience. Und beim Festival of Resilience ging es gerade darum, eine neue Form von Erinnern zu setzen, was an Ereignisse, die ja gar nicht so lange her sind. Wenn wir von Erinnerungskultur sprechen, dann kommen wir eher darauf zurück, es aufzuarbeiten, wie die NS-Zeit war. Und jetzt ist sozusagen der Shift auf die neue Geschichte und die neuen Formen des Erinnerns. Und auch da wiederum den Bogen schlagen zu den Themen, die wir vorher besprochen haben, einfach darüber nachzudenken, okay, wir befinden uns ganz häufig in einer Situation von fehlender Empathie. Und wenn die Empathie dann doch da ist, fehlen die Worte und die Ausdrucksformen, diese zu kommunizieren an Menschen, die es betrifft, aber auch untereinander. Ich finde, uns fehlt häufig die Sprache, und deswegen bin ich so dankbar, Ezra, dass du das jetzt gerade auch angesprochen hast, so von verschiedenen kulturellen Sprachen und Formen der Kommunikation, und dann doch immer sich daran zu besinnen, dass es ja um Menschen geht. Dass all diese Ereignisse zwar strukturell und sonst wie hinterfragt werden können und auch müssen, gleichzeitig es betrifft Personen, die fühlen, die da sind, die Familien haben, die Personen sind, Persönlichkeiten und auf dieser Ebene sich zu begegnen und auch offen zuzugeben, dass es gerade total überwältigt und in diesem Moment auch gemeinsam zu verweilen, ohne irgendwelche Bekenntnisse oder irgendwelche Statements laut ins Mikro zu schreien, sondern ganz umgekehrt von der anderen Seite das Ganze aufzusatteln und auch vielleicht im Pendant an viele anderen Veranstaltungen, die zu dem Zeitpunkt auch woanders geplant haben, wo es ja dann doch sehr starker Fokus auf die Statements der Politik lagen, hier dann doch die Stimmen der Betroffenen, die Gesichter der Betroffenen und die Präsenz der Betroffenen zu kennzeichnen.
Anyone else have any thoughts? We have a question from someone watching the live stream that I've just been sent. I won't say the name for privacy. The question was sent in German. Nach solcher fürchterliche Ereignisse verspricht jedes Mal die Politik nie wieder. Ich würde mich mehr freuen, wenn zum Beispiel in Schulen darüber unterrichtet wird, was halten die Beteiligten davon. So, yeah, this maybe goes back to something that got mentioned also before about how, you know, Angela Merkel is saying that she's pledging to do more in education to combat discrimination, anti-Semitism, racism. How do you think this kind of education, you know, how would this type of education be carried out? What exactly do we need to be teaching and where? So maybe Yaffa, since you work in education, you've been a teacher, can you teach people not to hate?
Oh boy, what a question. I mean, I think this is a central question for a lot of different organizations that are trying to combat hate. And as also someone who continues to do work for a former concentration camp in Germany, it's a question there also. And I mean, I think, I guess off the cuff, without a big PowerPoint behind me based on a lot of research and evidence, so please don't take this as a gospel. But I think there has to be, there possibly should be a three-pronged approach, where one, it's about family and what's actually being taught in the home. I think you can have as fantastic of an education, but if your family or if your parents, if your grandparents have never been exposed to anyone who is not like them, then it's very hard for you to learn to be, to love humanity for being humans. I think the second big approach is also having people who are from different cultures and different backgrounds speak in schools, and that there's possibly even a focus then for the students to take it upon themselves to study and to learn and to think about initiatives of how they can approach this. I think something that's so powerful about the Jewish students and what they did for the Kietz-Döner was that it came from the students themselves. And it was an act that they were doing to participate in solidarity. And that will have such a greater effect than a teacher teaching them about this event, 10 years down the line, and then moving on in the curriculum. So having an active piece of learning.
Anyone else want to say something about the role of education in preventing?
First of all, what Yaffa said really spoke to me. I think family values is where a large part of education comes from. I see that also in our particular perpetrator. I think the values that he got from home, he echoed them very clearly. He took them a step further, but there's very much seeds for the ideas which he spoke about, or which he acted upon from his intimate home. What Yaffa said also about meeting real people who are who you're not familiar with, I think is really powerful. I think you can teach not to hate. I think it would be statistically very improbable for me, with the education I got, to carry out, let's say, an anti-Semitic attack like the perpetrator did. So obviously there's a role that education plays. I feel that in my education, we'll call it religious education maybe, I love the stranger was a big value. I think that I also grew up in a relatively closed community. I grew up in an Orthodox community So my knowledge of the rest of the world was limited, but it was, when I did think about other cultures, it was always with a curiosity and a love. And I think that's something that is an element of education. You can't know everything about Jews, you can't know everything about Muslims, you can't know everything about anyone, but it's not about knowledge, it's about just kind of somehow fostering positive emotions to your own community and also to people who you don't know anything about. And I think, I think that maybe that's it. I had one more something I wanted to say on that, but I'm forgetting at the moment, so I'll leave it at that.
Ismet, was meinen Sie, wie wichtig ist Bildung dafür, dass wir verhindern, dass sowas in Deutschland passiert, was in Halle passiert ist?
Genau, das ist die wichtigste Frage, die man wirklich, ich habe ein paar Mal darüber gesprochen, wie Yaffa und Esra sagt es, genauso ist. Allerwichtigste Punkt ist die Familienbeziehungen zwischen den Kindern. Das ist sehr, sehr, sehr wichtig. Egal wo man lebt, welche Gesellschaft man lebt, man muss die Kinder so vorbereiten, dass für diese Gesellschaft was Gutes zu tun, außer negative Sachen, immer positiv vorbereiten. Und danach zweite Schritte kommt die Kita, die Erziehende für Kitan, die machen die tollste Job eigentlich, aber weil da kommt verschiedene Kinder, die gar nicht sich kennen, die bauen dort eine Freundschaft, die bauen dort eine Laden, ein Geschäft, eine Gesellschaft, eine Leidenschaft zwischen die Kinder sehr gut kommunizieren kann. Die Kita-Erzieher sind sehr wichtiger als Lehrer, weil die Kinder sind in dem Alter, die alles speichern, diese Gehirne, egal was die nehmen, die naschen alles, was die nehmen. Die sind sehr wichtig, vorbereiten für Schule. Dann kommt die allerwichtigste sind Lehrer, die Kinder vorbereiten, für was die Kinder sich bewegen. Was haben die? Ich höre viele Schüler und Schülerinnen, die haben so tolle Ideen, so tolle Sachen im Kopf, aber es scheint so, dass nicht gesehen wird. Das ist die wichtigsten 3 Schritte, wenn die zusammenarbeiten. Sonst die Bildung nutzt nichts. Wenn nicht zusammen ist, einer fehlt, das passiert genau sowas wieder. Aber wenn die 3 Sachen hintereinander gut gebaut ist, es wird eine sehr gute Gesellschaft, wie Multikulti zu sein. Wir sind hier als manche sprechen Dialekte, manche können nicht sprechen, manche tanzen, manche singen, manche schreien, weinen. Und das macht schön, das macht bunt und das ist die schönste. Egal wo man lebt, man kann zusammen sehr gute Sachen rausfinden und zusammen tun. Was ist Wichtigstes zwischen die Deutschen und die Ausländer fehlt viele Kommunikation. Die machen nicht vieles zusammen. Dadurch, die kennen sich nicht genau. Muss man nicht die Menschen beurteilen, bevor man nicht kennt, sondern muss man sehr viele miteinander Sachen üben, machen, vorbereiten, tun, dann sich kennenzulernen, dann kann man viele Sachen ändern können. Diese Bildungssache ist sehr wichtig, wenn alles zusammen arbeitet. Eine Sache noch für den Kinderheime sind auch sehr wichtig. Die Kinder dort ohne Familie, die dort kommen aus schwierigen Gründen, die gehen dort. Die Kinder, die dort sind, die müssen auch sehr gut gebildet, vorbereitet sein. Die sind wichtiger als ein Kind als Familie hat, weil die haben aus verschiedenen Gründen Familie verloren oder von den Familien weggenommen. Die sind auch ein Teil von uns alle, die müssen auch sehr, sehr gut vorbereitet sein für die Zukunft.
So as Ismet was talking about, it's about education, but also personal relationships that I think contribute to people accepting a multicultural society that becomes then stronger than those who don't want that for Germany. Sabrina, you've also been quite outspoken about these things. Where do you see the role of education, or is it more important to create these spaces for connection just among individuals?
Both. Yeah, sorry for, there's nothing I can do about that one, so please is a disturbance. I hope it's not too bad. Yeah, it kind of shocks me that the first time that he met a Jew was when he tried to kill one, right? Like, that's weird. And it also, like, that, it was a conversation I had with Ezra for like a lot of the trial, which was like, does he think that I like go home and like control the bank? Like, what does he think I do with my life to like hurt him so badly, you know? And like something about that is like absurd and surreal. I don't know what that means for Angela Merkel or like her pledge or something like this, but I know that that's weird. And also I can totally echo what others have been saying, which is that like there comes a point in child education or in a child education when you realize they can't be a Nazi. It's impossible for them to be a Nazi. You raise them with like enough compassion for difference that it just, you know? It was a really powerful conversation I had with one of the lawyers where, you know, they're very active and they've been active against Nazis for 30 years or something like that. And it was one of their fears when they had a son. Like, how is my son going to end up? What if he ends up on the far right, you know? And they all said in a conversation, there comes a point when you realize they can't because you raise them with enough openness or you raise them without hate. And so it's just not possible. It's not the hardest thing ever.
Can I also add quickly something to what Sabrina just said? I think one reason that I do have hope, and I'm just smiling a lot while listening to these other people speak, because actually, like, if you do like other cultures, your life is just more fun. Like, I think, okay, I kind of understand a little bit. He sees, like, the perpetrator is really into guns. Like, he gets some, like, personable, he sees himself as, like, he has some, he sees some manhood in the way he acted, whatever. But in the end of the day, his life is miserable. He's destroyed the life of his mother. Like, he's given up his life. Like, he's not having a good life. And like, people who kind of do embrace the love that exists around them, if they look for it, will just be happier. It's more appealing. And I think, yes, there's like new things there's appeal of the anger and the far right and the fake news, and there's ways that we have to engage with that because those things do have appeal in certain sense, but ultimately you're happier and your life is better if you just kind of choose love over hate. And that's why I do have some hope for the strength of that.
Ezra, I couldn't think of a better way to end this conversation with the conclusion that your life is a lot better if you choose love over hate. And I'm humbled and I'm inspired by all of you that despite experiencing something that is horrific and incredibly dark and could leave somebody feeling very hopeless, you've not let that person do that to you. And in fact, you have taken a horrible experience and turned it into something powerful inside of each of you, that you're able to contribute an even brighter light and a brighter source of inspiration for everyone around you. So you are the teachers that we need. Perhaps you are the shining lights, and your affection for one another is so evident and also so powerful, and it's also so much powerful than any hate of any extremists or anybody who has these poisonous ideas. So Thank you for this really fascinating, inspiring, and empowering conversation. Ezra Waxman, Ismet, Tekin, Yaffa, Fogel, Sabrina Slipchenko, and Anastasia Platuchina, thank you so very much to all of you. And the conversation will continue in many forms for many, many years to come. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Our Fachsymposium continues tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. with a discussion entitled Reflexionsimpulse für die Bildungspolitik und pädagogische Praxis, so more on education in Germany. That'll be followed by a series of workshops that start at 11:30. You can find all the details online, of course. So thank you to everyone watching. Thank you for your participation, and we hope that you'll join us for the rest of the symposium in the next 2 days. Take care, everyone.